Hello, welcome to my little reading nook again. We're working on reading the fairy doll. And there's two more chapters. I've read chapter 1 and chapter 2 to you, and you'll have to find them. And now we're going to read chapter 3 and maybe chapter 4 before I get up. Just kind of depends. You guys know that I've kind of got a cold, and yesterday my throat kind of went to tickling. But I've got me some hot tea. Got me a cup of hot tea right here. I've got a good light coming in my window. I like to have a good light when I'm reading. So we're going to get started because I don't know what happened. What happened when we left? Oh, the fairy doll was lost. Wonder what happened to the fairy doll. We're going to have to read and find out. Chapter 3. This is The Fairy Doll by Rumer, Godden. "You must have dropped her on the road," said Mother. "But I didn't." "Perhaps you left her at school." "I didn't." "In your satchel? In your pocket? On the counter in the shop? In the bathroom? On the bookshelf? Behind the clock? Up the apple tree?" I didn't," sobbed Elizabeth. Everyone was very kind. They all looked everywhere, high and low, up and down, in and out. Godfrey said he looked under every leaf in the whole garden that was big enough. It was no good. Fairy doll was lost. Elizabeth went and lay down on the floor behind the cedar chest. She only came out to have a cup of milk and go to bed. Next morning she went behind the chest and lay down again. "Make her come out," said Josie, who seemed curiously worried. "Leave her alone," said Mother. "She must come out. She has to go to school." But Elizabeth would not go to school. How could she? She could not say her tables now, or spell, or read, or sew, and she had not brushed her teeth. The tears made a wet place in the dust on the floor. "And I can't ride my bicycle," she said. It was Christabel's birthday. Christabel was 12. Elizabeth had a present done up in yellow paper. It was a peppermint lollipop, but she did not give it to Christabel. She stayed most of the day behind the cedar chest, and a day can feel like weeks when you're 7 years old. "Make her come out," said Josie. At 4 o'clock, Mother came up. "Great-grandmother has come for the birthday tea," she said. "Great-grandmother?" Elizabeth lay very still. "I should come down if I were you," said Mother. Last time great-grandmother came, she had sent for Elizabeth, and Elizabeth had come with a tear-stained face. It was tear-stained now, but "I could wash it," said Elizabeth, and from somewhere she thought she heard a ting. Her dress had been dirty. It was dirty now, but "I could change it," said Elizabeth, and she heard another ting. It was faint and far away. It could not have been a ting because the chest was empty. The fairy doll was gone, but it sounded like a ting. Very slowly Elizabeth sat up. "Good afternoon, Elizabeth," said great-grandmother. No one else took any notice as Elizabeth brushed and cleaned in a clean dress, put the present by Christabel, and slid into her own place. She was stiff from lying on the floor. Her head ached and her throat was sore from crying, and she was hungry. Mother gave her a cup of tea. The tea was sweet and hot, and there were minced chicken sandwiches with lettuce, shortcake biscuits, chocolate tarts, sponge fingers, and meringues, besides the birthday cake. Mother passed the sandwiches to Elizabeth and gave her another cup of tea. Elizabeth began to feel much better. Christabel's cake was pink and white. It had "Christabel, Happy Birthday" written on it and 12 candles. "And I," said great-grandmother, "am 8 times 12. A dewdrop slid down her nose and twinkled. 8 times 12. Who can tell me what that is?" asked great-grandmother. With her eyes on the dewdrop before any of the others could answer, "Ting, 96, said Elizabeth. After tea they had races. One was the button, the thread, and the needle. "I can race that," said great-grandmother. "I'll have Elizabeth for my partner." Great-grandmother threaded the needle as she sat in a chair. Elizabeth had to run with the button, sew it to a patch of cloth, and run back. "I can't," she began. But nimble fingers, said Great-grandmother. The stitches flew in and out. The button was on. Elizabeth ran back, and she and Great-grandmother won the double prize. Magic pencils that wrote in 4 colors. "Dear me, how annoying," said Great-grandmother. "I had meant to stop at the shop and get a few things, some silver polish, a packet of Lux, a 1 and 6-penny duster, and a nutmeg, and I forgot. Elizabeth, hop on your bicycle and get them for me." "But I can't." "Here's 5 shillings," said Great-grandmother. "Bring me the change." Ting! Before Elizabeth knew where she was out on the road riding her bicycle and perfectly steady. Soon she was back with all the things and 1 and 4-pence change for Great-grandmother. Then were the tings me?" asked Elizabeth, puzzled. She could not believe it. "I thought they were fairy doll." "I thought so too," said Josie. She sounded disappointed. "How could they be?" asked Godfrey. "They couldn't," said Christabel, who after all was 12 now and ought to know. "Don't be silly," said Christabel. "She was just a doll." "Fairy doll." It was Great-grandmother who corrected Christabel, but her voice sounded high up and far away, as if it came from somewhere else, asked Elizabeth. Now on to chapter 4. In the country, November and December are the best time for hedges, but now no one picked the old man's beard for a mattress or winter berries to bake. No one went to the wood for fresh moss and new toadstools. The fairy house was broken up. The bicycle basket was on the bicycle. For Christmas, they each chose what they would get. "A riding case," said Christabel. "A reversing engine, number 51, for my Hornaby train," said Godfrey. "A kitchen set," said Josie. Elizabeth did not know what she wanted. "Another fairy doll," suggested Christabel. "Another? There isn't another," said Elizabeth, shocked. She was fairy doll. On Christmas Eve, the tree was set up in the drawing room. Mother opened the cedar chest and brought the decorations down. The tinsel and the icicles, the witch balls and trumpets and bells, the lights and candle clips. There were new candles, new boxes of sweets, new little bags of nuts, shiny new coins, and new crackers. "But what shall we put at the top?" asked Christabel. Elizabeth ran out of the room, upstairs to the cedar chest. She was going to cast herself down and stay there. "I don't want Christmas," said Elizabeth. But the lid of the chest was open, and on top of a pile of blankets and folded summer vests, she saw the cotton reel box that held Fairy Doll. "Empty," said Elizabeth. "Empty." She was just beginning to sob when, "Look in the box," when a loud, clear ting. "Look in the box." Elizabeth stopped in the middle of a sob, but she was cleverer now, and she argued. "Why?" asked Elizabeth. The ting took no notice. "Look in the box." "Why? It's empty." "Look in the box." "It's empty. Look." It was more than a ting. It was a stir, as if the box were alive, as if a wand were waving. Slowly Elizabeth put out her hand. The lid of the box flew off. "Did I open it?" asked Elizabeth. She heard the blue tissue paper rustle. "Did I rustle it?" And out in her hand came Fairy Doll. "But how?" asked Christabel. "How? And how did Elizabeth know?" "I said, 'What shall we put on top?' and she ran straight upstairs," said Godfrey, "and came back with Fairy Doll." "Who was lost?" said Josie. "Wasn't she lost?" "We don't understand," they said, all three together. "You must think that when Josie was jealous, she stole Fairy Doll and put her back in the cedar chest. I thought so too. But then why was Josie so surprised? And how was it Fairy Doll was not draggled at all, but clean, in a fresh new dress, and new silver wings, and another pair of nice sewn shoes. Perhaps it was Mother who found her and put her away, because it was time that Elizabeth had things of her own. Mother could have made the dress and wings, but I couldn't have sewn those shoes, said Mother. Fairy Doll looked straight in front of her, and the wand stirred gently in her hand. In Chapter 5, Fairy Doll went back in her place on the top of the Christmas tree. After Christmas, she was laid away in the cedar chest till next year. She has done her work, said Mother. Christabel had her writing case. Godfrey had his engine. Josie, who was cured of being jealous, had a kitchen set with 2 pots and pans, a pastry board, a rolling pin, and a kettle. Elizabeth had a long-closed baby doll with eyes that opened and shut. She loves the baby doll, but every time she goes up and down the stairs, she stops on the landing and puts her hand on the cedar chest. Every time she does it, it may be her imagination. From inside comes a faint glass ting that is like a Christmas bell. The end. That's the end of the fairy doll. Wonder what happened. Was it a magical doll? I don't know. That was a good story. I enjoyed reading that. Y'all love ya.